Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to different parts of the world. Today, myself, Vajra, I'm from Sri Lanka, and my fellow co-chair, Sylvia from Latvia, would like to welcome the participants, if there are any. And Sylvia and me have been the co-facilitators of the virtual working group 1 that has been assigned to formulate targets, indicators, and milestones. So today we do a small presentation on the progress or the outcome of the virtual working group meeting that we have had since November 2019 to February 2021. Slide 2. Yeah, thanks. Total number of 5 virtual working group meetings have been held from November 9, 2019 to February 2021. And for each virtual working group meeting, there have been more than 200 registered participants, and they have been asked to submit electronic submissions on feedback on targets, indicators, and milestones, and on 4 occasions, and the response have been very overwhelming, and we are very pleased and happy about the enthusiasm, commitment, and dedication of the participants. As a recapitulation of the virtual working group work, Group 1, which has been mandated and tasked to finalize the target proposal currently set out in the SAICM document, SAICM/IP.4/3, with a view to enable multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral, and multidisciplinary commitment and action. As we perfectly understand, an objective of this nature, sound management of chemicals and sustainable use of chemical, most certainly require multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral, and multidisciplinary action and commitment. So we, in order to solicit that, we have been mandated, and also we have been mandated to develop a set of recommendations for a process to establish indicators and milestones for the finalized target. We have not yet finalized the target. We have been extensively discussing on the targets only, and we have not touched upon indicators and milestones. Therefore, these are the 2 tasks that have been assigned to the group, Group 1. So having said that, now I will hand over the floor to my fellow co-chair, our dynamic and charismatic Sylvia from Latvia, who have been an inspiration to the entire group and to me in particular. Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vajra. You're always very kind, and thanks for that introduction. It's a pleasure working with you as well, of course. So the work of this particular group has been connected to various processes and discussions which have taken place over the course of quite a long period of time now. So starting in IP2 in March 2018, a co-chair's paper was discussed, which identified strategic objectives and target formulations. On a basis of that, an outcome document was annexed to the meeting report and submitted to OEWG3 for its consideration. In OEWG3 in April 2019, this co-chair's paper and proposal on strategic objectives and targets was looked at. However, no discussions on targets took place. There were just general discussions on vision scope and strategic objectives. And at this time, there were some brackets introduced into the text of vision scope and strategic objectives. Further then, between OEWG3 in April 2019 and IP3 in October 2019, we had a technical expert workshop, which worked in quite detail on indicators, which took place in September 2019. After that, from both building on the work that was done in VWG3, as well as in the technical expert workshop and indicators. The contact group in IP3 in October 2019 had a partial discussion on vision, scope, and strategic objectives, and a more detailed discussion on targets. There was not maybe further thorough enough discussions on principles and approaches within that contact group. But however, there was an outcome document that was annexed to the meeting report as a result of the contact group deliberations at IP3. And as a result, then, the technical working group was established on indicators and targets. It was mandated by IP3 and to work on the targets. And as a result of its work, there was a development of outcome documents SAICM IP4/3 and SAICM IP4/INF/15, which was used as a basis for discussions of the Virtual Working Group 1. The Virtual Working Group 1, as you know, was working on targets and indicators as established and mandated by the SAICM Bureau. And hereby we'll just give you a brief review of the outcome document that came from these particular deliberations of this group. So next slide, please. The Virtual Working Group has made progress to achieve the group mandate. For part 1 of the mandate, the group has developed a document of possible formulations of targets based on points of convergence of views expressed by stakeholders during the virtual meetings and in the electronic submissions received, including new targets for which the formulations gained overall support. For part 2 of the mandate, the group has decided that more work needs to be done before IP4 and/or SAICM5 on targets, indicators, and milestones. The group has put out 2 options for consideration in the outcome document. The SAICM5 Bureau will be making the final decision on how this work moves forward. Options for further work include option 1, which proposes a continuation of the work on targets, indicators, and milestones by a policy expert group similar in nature to the current Virtual Working Group on targets. Option 2 combines work of a policy expert group with work by a subgroup, more technical in nature, which will prepare specific work on indicators. The United Nations Environment Programme, along with other international organizations, including members of the IOMC, have expressed their support to take the lead in the indicator part of that work. Following issues, as identified in SAICM IP4/3, were not deliberated by the Virtual Group on targets, indicators, and milestones. These were the term waste and how it would be reflected, reference to countries or governments, elaboration of timeframe for targets, such as by 20XX, definitions in glossary. Some terms, though broadly accepted and used, may need defining or reference in a glossary, such examples as circular economy, in order to avoid vague elements of these targets. The name of the future instrument has not been determined, and clarifying the definition of sustainable alternatives and a need to reference a definition for sustainable and green chemistry. Next slide, please. During its deliberations, the Virtual Working Group added to this list of the deliberations that came from IP4/3, and there were no substantive discussions, for instance, on the formulation of the strategic objectives. And as I showed in the previous slide, these discussions on the formulation of the strategic objectives have not been discussed since before the OAWG3 in April 2019. And thus, through discussions, participants identified a necessity to reflect upon them in the future, especially because there is still an introduction of brackets on certain issues. There were comments also related to the confidential business information, which should be considered by the group developing the high-level declaration. The Virtual Working Group on targets also identified a need to consider targets together with strategic objective formulations to establish a comprehensive indicator framework for the new instrument. As the development of the indicator framework progresses, there is a need to limit the number of targets. targets need to be considered in a reiterative process and together with the indicators in order to capture and develop a comprehensive indicator framework for the instrument, including considerations of resources and capacities for monitoring implementation. The targets need to capture all 11 basic elements of the overall orientation and guidance, and some targets may be considered as high-level targets or indicators or the high-level declaration. These include such targets as currently is A1, AYY, new B3, and E5. The concept of accident prevention and response needs to be considered under the strategic objective A targets A1 to A3, and there also needs to be an inclusion of gender segregated data. So in terms of the next steps, the Virtual Working Group 1 has 4 recommendations for further consideration by the SAICM 5 President, the Bureau, and the IP co-chairs on 1, further work on targets, indicators, and milestones, including a decision on the options for the next phase. 2, the UK's offer to host a workshop to contribute to further the work done on targets. 3, have a broader discussion to tackle issues with the term waste and how it will be reflected before and if work is resumed. And 4, to identify the appropriate time to revisit the discussion on strategic objective formulations. So, of course, there is much more work to be done. However, during the virtual working group, considering the difficulties in conducting business in this manner, I think the participants who were involved did their best to make some progress on target formulations and in understanding the preparations of a very comprehensive framework for this instrument in the future. So I wish you, on behalf of myself and my dear co-chair Wachira, that you have the best of luck in the continued work on these particular issues. Thank you.